New Orleans has sadly become the new murder capital of the US, but how did this come to be? Let's unravel the threads of history, sociology, and criminology that weave together this tragic narrative. A history of crime in New Orleans. Historically, New Orleans has been no stranger to crime. From the ruthless pirates that once roamed the Mississippi River to the mafia families that controlled the city's underworld, New Orleans has been a hub of illicit activities for centuries. However, the last few decades have seen a different kind of criminal activity take root in the city: gang-related violence. The catalyst: segregation and socioeconomic disparity. Much like St. Louis, New Orleans has a dark past of racial segregation and economic disparity. These socioeconomic issues have created pockets of impoverished neighborhoods throughout the city, similar to the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex in St. Louis. These neighborhoods have bred a new generation of criminals, mirroring the rise of the Pruitt-Igoe gang in St. Louis. The rise of drug trade and gang violence. The transformation of crime in New Orleans during the 1980s and 1990s was monumental. This era marked the emergence of crack cocaine, a powerful drug that had a profound impact on the city, echoing the changes seen in St. Louis and other American cities. No longer were the streets simply a means of travel, they morphed into battlegrounds where territorial disputes unfolded in broad daylight. In these times, the influence of notorious Los Angeles gangs, the Bloods and the Crips, permeated far and wide. This influence was particularly significant in New Orleans, where local groups such as the Boys of Destruction and Horseshoe Posse underwent drastic transformations. Initially, these groups were breakdancing crews, but the crack epidemic presented a new opportunity, or perhaps more aptly, a grim necessity. These groups found a new purpose: drug dealing, a shift which ignited a violent tug-of-war over territories. As these New Orleans gangs embraced their new role as drug pushers, their neighborhoods became increasingly volatile. The city began to resemble a checkerboard, each square representing a territory fiercely guarded by its respective gang. The persistent echoes of gunfire in these areas were a chilling testament to this new entrenched reality. Drug pushing was far more than a simple commercial activity, it was a symbol of power and control. With the influx of crack cocaine, gangs expanded their ranks, pulling in young, impressionable individuals into a life marked by crime. This, in turn, reinforced the cycle of violence, creating a spiraling situation where increased gang membership led to more drug pushing, leading to more violence. In this turbulent era, the Boys of Destruction and Horseshoe Posse transformed from mere gangs to miniature armies. The members were no longer simple delinquents, they were soldiers engaged in a war that had very real consequences. Loyalty was pledged to their respective gangs and the territories they controlled, and every act of violence served as a twisted badge of honor. As the violence escalated, a deep-seated hatred took root, propagating the never-ending cycle of gang wars. Retribution became the law of the streets. Every act of violence was met with an equally violent response, creating a cascade of tit-for-tat killings that kept the city in a perpetual state of fear and chaos. Even today, while the names of the gangs may have changed and the types of drugs may have evolved, the fundamental issue remains. A relentless cycle of violence fueled by drugs, revenge, and a desperate struggle for power continues to plague New Orleans, a legacy of the transformations seen in the 80s and 90s. Influence of media and culture. The influence of media and pop culture cannot be overlooked when examining the surge of gang violence in New Orleans. It is interesting to note that the formative years of this escalation coincided with the dawn of a new era in American pop culture. Films like Colors, music genres like gangster rap, and subsequently drill music all emerged as influential mediums. These mediums did not merely entertain, they crafted narratives that incited, inspired, and in many cases glorified the gangster lifestyle, deeply impacting the impressionable youth of the time. Movies like Colors, released in 1988, were controversial yet influential. They offered an unfiltered glimpse into the world of gang warfare, presenting the lives of gang members with raw honesty. Although these films aimed to expose the dark underbelly of gang life, they inadvertently romanticized the lifestyle. The lives of the protagonists, filled with action, camaraderie, and rebellion, resonated with the youth. This resonance often resulted in a skewed perception of gang life, fueling their fantasies and aspirations of power and respect. Similarly, the emergence of gangster rap in the late 1980s and early 1990s played a crucial role in shaping the youth's perception of gangs. Artists such as NWA, Ice-T, and Tupac Shakur used their music to chronicle their experiences in inner-city neighborhoods, often glorifying the violence they witnessed or experienced. The lyrics of their songs narrated tales of power struggles, survival, and rebellion, reflecting the reality of their lives. These narratives held a strong appeal for the youth, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. They saw in these stories a reflection of their own struggles, igniting a desire to command respect and wield power just like their musical heroes. In more recent years, the drill music scene has had a significant influence on gang violence. Emerging from the impoverished neighborhoods of Chicago and spreading across other cities like St. Louis and New Orleans, drill music is characterized by its dark, violent, and often nihilistic lyrical content. A key feature of this genre is the use of disrespectful lyrics where artists openly taunt and insult their rivals. This has directly contributed to escalating violence as these lyrics often provoke retaliatory actions, further fueling the cycle of revenge and bloodshed. The media and pop culture thus served as catalysts, magnifying and intensifying the undercurrents of violence in New Orleans. They provided a platform that not only mirrored the harsh realities of street life, but also glamorized it, creating a dangerous allure that led many young individuals down a path of violence and crime. This influence remains palpable today as new forms of music and media continue to shape and reflect the ever-evolving culture of gang violence. Legacy of violence. The legacy of violence left behind by the tumultuous years of the 80s and 90s still linger in the streets of New Orleans today, casting a long shadow over the city and its residents. Much like in St. Louis, where the brutal murder of the notorious gangster Hitman T sparked a wave of retaliation killings and set off a seemingly endless chain of gang wars, New Orleans has seen a similar pattern of violence and retribution. This grim legacy, marked by bloodshed and strife, has torn apart the social fabric of the communities caught in the crossfire. Neighborhoods have been turned into battlegrounds, homes into mourning sites, and childhoods into battlefields, breeding a landscape of fear, anger, and despair. Fatherless homes are a particularly poignant symbol of this violence. Many young men have been swallowed by the vortex of gang violence, leaving behind families shattered by grief and loss. Their absence echoes in the lives of their children who grow up in the shadows of their father's violent pasts. This absence is often a void filled with the chilling tales of their father's lives and deaths, perpetrating a vicious cycle where children follow in their father's footsteps, lured by the allure of power, respect, and a twisted sense of belonging. Moreover, an entire generation has been raised under the ominous shadow of gang violence. For many of these young individuals, their formative years have been punctuated by the sounds of gunshots and sirens, and their realities shaped by the grim specter of violence. This exposure to continuous violence from an early age has severe ramifications. It breeds desensitization and normalizes violence, often leading these impressionable minds to view joining a gang as an inevitable part of growing up. Current situation and impact of police brutality. Just as the murder of Michael Brown sparked unrest in St. Louis, the tense relationship between the police and the black community in New Orleans has contributed to the city's high murder rate. Numerous incidents of police brutality and racial targeting have deepened the divide, making it harder to control the violence. The role of the rap scene. In a city without many mainstream rap artists, the local rap scene has unfortunately contributed to the violence. Lyrics boasting of criminal acts and taunting rival gangs have often escalated tensions, turning music into a weapon in the ongoing gang wars. The future, a city at crossroads. Today, New Orleans stands at a crossroads. The old color lines have faded, replaced by a web of complex gang affiliations and loyalties. As the new murder capital of the US, the city must confront its troubled past and address its ongoing socioeconomic issues. However, the path to healing is steep and uncertain. So there you have it, the tangled tale of why New Orleans has become the new murder capital of America. From segregation and socioeconomic disparity to drugs, gangs, and drill music, the causes are many and complex.